We also heard from, of course, Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong today, and she seemed confident in the Quad and AUKUS alliance and pretty confident, I have to say, in the new relationship with Donald Trump too, but it's only early days, we have to say. What do you see being a challenge? Obviously, they won't see eye to eye on everything.
Look, I think the government couldn't be happier with the way this has started. I mean, to have our foreign minister, one of the very first meetings with the incoming Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and of course alongside foreign ministers from India and Japan, this sends a very clear message from the administration through the State Department and other parts of the administration that this government is still focused on the Indo-Pacific and that countries like Australia and India and Japan are part of the Trump plan. And I think you could see probably a reflection of that as well in AUKUS. There will be, hurdles to clear yet, even though big investment in AUKUS projects. One of the real problems is people, finding the people to do the work, whether it's crewing the vessels or building them. And that's not just going to disappear.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some questions there, of course, whether the Trump administration will stay the course when it comes to the AUKUS deal here and exactly how that's going to work moving forward. We know he's been pretty tight-lipped about it so far. Donald Trump essentially says either work with the US or you're on the outer, basically. Do you see this power potentially changing the way leaders around the world approach certain issues like energy or climate change, for example?
Look, I think the Australian government will have to carve out its own space on issues like the environment and energy. And frankly, I don't know that the Australian government's position on those particular issues will be engaging the Trump administration terribly much. But the bigger picture strategic issues, definitely around AUKUS and US access to bases, for example, in Australia, at some level will. As I say, I think Senator Wong is completely right to be very happy with the way this has started. But there's one name, Holly, that's buried in the list of appointments that have already been made, and that's Elbridge Colby. Now, that won't be a name familiar to many viewers, perhaps, but he's just been appointed Under Secretary for Policy in the US Defence Department, a very important position. And he has been a staunch critic of AUKUS and the transfer of submarines. He's mellowed more recently. I think there's been some great diplomatic and other engagement with him. But he started off saying it was crazy, how can we be doing this? And he's now the Under Secretary for Policy in the US Defence Department. So there's still more work to be done.
Absolutely, and also questions around what sort of influence he will have moving forward too. I mean, the purpose of the Quad, of course, is to sort of work against the tensions that China puts forward. How do you foresee China and the US relationship moving forward now?
Look, China hates AUKUS. It hates the concept of AUKUS. It's not happy with the Quad. It sees all these things as about containing China. The Australian government, the US government and others, of course, have a very different take. But it is clearly in part about being able to confront China if China overreaches in certain environments. Even though the Quad is not a military agreement in any way, shape or form, but it is a foundation for security dialogue. And when it comes to AUKUS, clearly the technology transfers are a significant needle shifter, if and when they arrive, will shift the needle on the strategic balance in our part of the world. I think the US and China will work out their own dynamic. I think President Trump has his own way of dealing with leaders like Xi Jinping. Watch this space.
Absolutely. And another, a lot of key issues. There's the TikTok deal, whether China will agree to that, what happens with the Ukraine conflict too, and whether Trump, he said earlier that he's going to be speaking with Vladimir Putin. So it'll be really interesting to see sort of how that plays out as well. We do have to wrap things up. I mean, we could keep talking about Trump for a very long time. There's a lot to unpack already. But I would like to get your thoughts on a really important issue that's happening here in Australia and the disturbing rise in anti-Semitism since the October 7 attacks and potential now for foreign actors to be potentially involved in these attacks. What are your thoughts on that? And has the Prime Minister allowed this to happen?
Well, I think I'll just address the issue around foreign actors, which is I was surprised to hear that suggested connection being made. If it's true, this is a really significant development. The implication is that either a foreign non-state actor, like a terrorist organisation, or a state actor that is hostile to Australia and or Israel is actively intervening inside the Australian community, leading to violence. I mean, it couldn't get much more serious as an allegation. I think we need to give the police a little time and ASIO and others a little time to get to the bottom of this. But I think that we would all like to see some pretty clear statements around it, because it must give rise to a lot of disquiet inside the Jewish community if they believe this is being targeted and controlled or actioned from offshore.
Yeah, definitely some concerns. And of course, the AFP saying here that there are tactics behind why they haven't released too much detail about this as of yet. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Take care.